Good evening, South Australia. I'm Deanna Williams. Welcome to Nightline. Making news tonight, Graham Ingerson buckles under the pressure, resigning as Deputy Premier. A salute to an Adelaide soldier killed on the battlefields of France. And a stunning new era in aviation for Hong Kong. Also tonight, if you're missing the tennis, we'll relive Pete Sampras's historic Wimbledon win. But first, another leadership crisis tonight for the state government. Graham Ingerson has resigned as Deputy Premier, but has vowed to stay on in Cabinet. National 9 News predicted Mr Ingerson's resignation on Thursday. That's when a special inquiry was set up to investigate claims he'd misled Parliament. Political reporter Chris Kenny joins me now to discuss tonight's dramatic events. Chris, why has the resignation come now?
Well, Deanna, it's never easy for a minister to realise that he's become a liability to a government, and certainly that realisation didn't come easily to Mr Ingerson. I spoke to him personally on Friday and bumped into him actually at a restaurant on the weekend, and both times he was very forthright, actually very confident that he could ride this out. Now, today, Cabinet met and he would have come under quite a bit of pressure from his colleagues. Certainly, the Premier was very much aware of the damage that was happening to the government. But the resignation didn't actually happen until after 6 o'clock tonight, and no statement was issued. The media were gathering outside Mr Ingerson's office where he was holed up. There were pizzas going in and advisors and close supporters turning up there to support him. And while the news of his resignation was leaking and no statement was coming out, it was about an hour ago that we heard from Mr Ingerson, for the very first time in a very rowdy scenes at his office.
Mr Ingerson, can we ask you, you resigned?
Yes, I have formally resigned this evening
as Deputy
Premier, and I've been the last 2 hours personally contacting all the colleagues, and I'll continue to do that until I finish in the next couple of minutes.
Why don't you resign as a minister too, Mr Ingerson? That's it.
Excuse me, none of you in here, please. I stood down as deputy, and there was no question from the Premier in terms of it. There was a decision my wife and I made as a family that we're not prepared to accept the nonsense that's being put forward by opponents any longer. It's not in the best interest of the Liberal Party. It's not in the best interest of this government. And I have made the decision that as a person that has some integrity in this Parliament, that I am not going to allow the opponents that I've had in the Parliament to continue to destroy this government.
The problem for Mr Ingerson is those sorts of images tend to portray a government that's destroying itself. Rowdy was probably the wrong adjective, but certainly a messy way for a minister, a Deputy Premier, to resign.
Well, Chris, does this ease the pressure on the Premier?
Well, it's a victory of sorts for Mr Olsen because he has got a damaging Deputy Premier scandal out of the way for the time being. But Mr Olsen really would have preferred, I think, for Mr Ingerson to go from Cabinet altogether, because the problem is now that the inquiry into Mr Ingerson's alleged misleading of Parliament will go on for another couple of weeks. The evidence there is quite damaging for Mr Ingerson. There's every chance now that this saga could just continue, and in a couple of weeks we could be talking about his further resignation from Cabinet altogether.
All right, when will the new deputy be chosen, and who do you think it'll be?
Well, the Liberal MPs meet again at Parliament House tomorrow morning, another crisis meeting for the Liberal MPs. They've become used to that. They'll elect a new Deputy Premier then. It could be Michael Armitage, the Infrastructure Minister. It could also be Rob Kerrin, the Agriculture Minister. I'd tend to put my money on him, but in times of crisis like this, it's dangerous to predict anything in the Liberal Party.
Incredible story tonight. Thanks for your time, Chris.
Thanks, Deanna.
We'll have a full wrap-up of the resignation and its implications for the Olsen government in National 9 News tomorrow night at 6. 82 years ago, on a muddy battlefield in France, Adelaide World War I digger Russell Basisto was killed in action. Today, the private was finally laid to rest, given full military honours. Rob Kelvin was there for this historic and very emotional service.
In the chill and mist of the morning on the Somme, the Australians were gathering. An hour early, but all sensing something special, all trying to touch something of the past. Then, like a heartbeat, we heard the sound of a muffled drum. Through the wheat fields, a digger from the Great War being escorted to his final resting place by members of his battalion. Russell George Basisto from Medindi was only 22. died less than a kilometre from this cemetery, killed by an artillery explosion in the Battle for Pozières in 1916. Australian soldiers fell more thickly here than in any other battle of the war. What happened to him remained a family mystery until a farmer disturbed the site with his plough earlier this year.
And so he died, a proud Australian digger, a beloved son and brother, a young man who gave his future for each of us.
Howard Pope, the last of the 27th who fought here, listened to words from home by Governor Sir Eric Neil.
3 generations of family members in Australia who sadly are unable to be here today wish to honour their Russell and to bring some of his home to this final resting place.
A touching moment with some soil from home.
Rest in peace, Russell, with much love and pride from your family and home in Adelaide, and may I say all the people of South Australia.
The Australian flag was removed, and as a piper played the lament, the coffin was lowered. And with him, one of his Australian uniform badges found in the dirt.
It is the closing of the chapter. I mean, it's a final, and he has been put to rest, and that's what we really wanted. And I mean, he's in a marvellous place, isn't it?
On another battlefield, a rousing French welcome for 4 of our oldest diggers. And a memorial's unveiled to remember the mateship of Australians who refused to leave the wounded in the disastrous Battle of Fromelles.
Standing in these fields, it's hard to comprehend what happened here 82 years ago. But the weekend's memorial services and the new copper statue will help keep alive that Australian spirit. Rob Kelvin in northern France for Nightline.
I'm joined now by Rick McLaren, the great-nephew of Private Bassisto. Hello, Rick, and thanks for your time.